Any medication? Just one sec. It's a little hard classic.
I've been on the force for over a decade, but this case still rattles me. When your parents are murdered, you expect grief, silence, shock. But Sarah Grace Patrick? She went online. She messaged influencers saying, "Search up Brock case, they're my parents." And less than a week later, we had to arrest her for their murders. The question I kept asking myself was, why? It wasn't just another domestic homicide. From the moment I read her messages, I knew something about this case would test every instinct I had. Was she trying to grieve or control the narrative before we even built it? That's the problem with cases like this. The clues aren't always in blood or fingerprints. Sometimes they're in the words people choose. It all started in Carrollton, Georgia, February 2025. James and Kristen Brock, her stepfather and mother, found dead in their bedroom. Minutes earlier, the 911 call had come in from Sarah herself. We rolled up thinking we had 2 victims and 1 grieving teenager. But as we worked the scene, the inconsistencies started piling up, and with each hour, Sarah's story made less and less sense. I've seen cold cases. I've seen open and shut cases. But this one kept me awake for nights. 17 years old, and already playing a game of truth and lies that could fool anyone, almost anyone. In this video, I'll take you through exactly how we pulled this case apart step by step until the truth was staring right back at us. If you want to follow more investigations like this, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You're not going to want to miss what I'm about to show you. The call came in at 8:43 p.m. I still remember the dispatcher's tone. Calm, but with that edge in her voice she gets when she knows it's bad.
Connects 2 gunshot victims, both unresponsive. Caller is a juvenile female. Says they're her parents.
I picked up my notepad, asked her to patch me into the recording. I like to hear it raw before I roll out. And that's when I first heard her voice.
911, what's your emergency?
The dispatcher asked.
My parents have been shot.
The girl replied. The voice was clear. Steady, no sobbing, no panic breathing, just matter of fact. She could have been reporting a break-in or fender bender.
Are they breathing?
No.
Do you know who shot them?
No, I just found them.
Her name was Sarah Grace Patrick, 17 years old. I've been doing this job long enough to know that people react to trauma in different ways. Some scream until their throats go raw. Some can't get a single word out. Some freeze. But a call like this, your parents dead in your own home, and you sound like you're placing a pizza order? That's rare. It sat in my gut like a weight as I pulled out of the lot and hit the lights. The drive there was quiet, and not just because it was a Tuesday night. My partner kept running over the same facts out loud, like saying them enough times would make them make sense. No forced entry. Caller was the only one home. Parents both shot. It was already looking like either someone very lucky or someone very close. When we pulled up to the Brock residence, the first thing I noticed was how still everything was. No neighbors standing out on their lawns, no barking dogs, no flashing lights from curious cell phone cameras. Just a pale 2-story house with a single porch light on and a teenage girl standing in the doorway. Sarah didn't run toward us. She didn't collapse in our arms. She just stood there, one shoulder leaning against the frame, her phone still in her right hand. She wasn't crying. Her eyes weren't red or swollen. The eyeliner was smudged slightly, but not from tears, more like she'd been wearing it for hours. I introduced myself, told her we were there to help, and asked her to step aside. She nodded once and moved back just enough to let us in. Her phone never left her hand. I caught the faint glow of an Instagram DM screen before she angled it away. The living room was the kind of space that told you this was a family who'd had their share of quiet evenings. A couch draped with a throw blanket, a coffee table scattered with a couple of mugs, one still steaming faintly, a half-played card game. And then, everything stopped looking normal. James Brock was slumped sideways in his recliner, a dark stain blooming across his chest. His head tilted just enough that I could see the exit wound in his temple. Kristen Brock was on the floor a few feet away, one hand outstretched toward him, the other curled in tight. 2 bullet wounds, both to the torso. Neither of them had moved after they'd been shot. No overturned furniture, no broken glass, no signs of a fight. This wasn't a struggle. This was execution. I stepped in closer, scanning the layout. From the position of their bodies, it looked like they'd been caught completely off guard, maybe even mid-conversation. James still had a remote in his lap. Kristen's phone lay on the floor beside her, unlocked on a text conversation.
I've seen dozens of shootings, but it's the small things that hit you the hardest. The mugs on the table. The faint smell of coffee still in the air. Whatever happened here, it happened fast. Within minutes, maybe seconds, of them feeling safe in their own home. While the first responders worked to confirm what we already knew, that neither James nor Kristen could be saved, I noticed Sarah. She wasn't watching the paramedics. She wasn't asking questions. She wasn't even looking at her parents. She was back near the door, thumbs moving across her screen. I glanced over my shoulder and caught a fragment of what she was typing. It wasn't to a family member. It wasn't to the police. It was to someone on Instagram, and then TikTok. Later, I'd learn exactly what those messages said. One of them read,
Search up Brock case. They're my parents.
At that moment, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. People grieve in strange ways. Some focus on distractions to keep from falling apart. But in 17 years on the job, I had never seen someone start broadcasting the story of their parents' murders before the crime scene was even sealed. The rest of the house was just as still. Upstairs, the beds were made. No signs of forced entry at any door or window. No muddy footprints. Whoever had done this hadn't needed to break in, and they'd left as quietly as they came. We marked the front hallway with evidence tape, photographed the scene, and began the slow, deliberate process of collecting every piece of physical evidence. In the kitchen there was a purse on the counter. Kristen's. Cash still inside. Credit cards untouched. No sign of robbery. On the fridge, a calendar with a few appointments scribbled in red pen. One caught my eye. Sarah, college visit. It was for the following week. When I stepped back into the living room, Sarah was watching me. Not with fear, not even curiosity. More like calculation. She asked if she could go upstairs to get something. I told her not yet. The house was an active crime scene. She shrugged, sat down on the bottom step, and went right back to her phone. What hit me hardest in those first moments wasn't the violence. It was the silence. In most double homicides, there's a chaos to the air. Neighbors calling out, radios crackling, people crying. Here, there was nothing. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the click of Sarah's thumbs on glass. It made the house feel less like a crime scene and more like a stage. One where the actors had already taken their final bows, and the spotlight was now on the last person left standing. By the time the coroner arrived, I already knew we'd be looking at Sarah more closely. It wasn't bias. It wasn't a rush to judgment. It was the accumulation of a dozen small details that didn't add up. The steadiness in her voice on the 911 call, the phone in her hand at the doorway, the lack of visible emotion, the decision to contact social media before anyone else. In this job, you learn that murder isn't just about what happened. It's about when, how, and why. And sometimes, the first answers come from the person who's talking the most. Or in Sarah's case, typing.
Back at the Brock house, we were working the scene methodically. Every movement documented, every photograph double-checked. But as soon as our evidence tech called me over to the coffee table, I knew we'd found something big. There, in plain sight, was a black Glock 19 handgun. Not tucked away in a drawer, not hidden in a safe. Just lying on top of a folded newspaper next to the TV remote. The slide was locked back, 2 rounds spent. I crouched beside it.
Is this theirs?
I asked one of the uniforms.
Registered to James Brock.
He replied.
Purchased 3 years ago, no report of it being stolen.
So the murder weapon hadn't left the house. Whoever killed James and Kristen had used their own gun and left it sitting out afterward. That's rare. Even in domestic cases, most shooters will at least try to hide the weapon, throw it in a river, something. Leaving it here, that was either arrogance or total disregard for being caught. Ballistics would later confirm what we suspected on sight. The bullets recovered from James and Kristen's bodies were a perfect match to the Glock. Same barrel markings, same tool impressions. No doubt about it, this was the gun. But the real shock came when the fingerprint results came back. It wasn't just James and Kristen's prints on the weapon. Sarah's were there too, clear as day. Not just on the grip where you might expect smudges from casual handling, but on the magazine. And not partial smears either. Full, fresh impressions. I'd been in enough courtrooms to know what that meant. Handling the magazine is different from just holding the gun. It meant she'd loaded it. Recently. We were still trying to process that when another call came in, from the digital forensics team working on Sarah's phone. They'd started a basic extraction of her search history, texts, and social media activity. Most teenagers have some questionable searches. But Sarah's were on a different level.
A week before the murders. How to erase gun residue from hands. 3 days before. Shot placement lethality. The night before. How long for inheritance to pay out after death? The room went quiet when that one came up. Motive. Right there in black and white.
Buried in her TikTok drafts folder, visible only because the forensic team had mirrored her phone, was a private, unposted video from about 3 weeks earlier. It was a 15-second skit. Sarah, wearing a hoodie, pointing a finger like a gun at 2 chairs positioned like they were facing a TV. She said nothing, but mouthed, "Bang, bang," before pretending to step over an imaginary body. The caption? "Sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do." When we brought this to the rest of the team, the debate started immediately. Could it be a coincidence? Teenagers post dark humor all the time, but in the context of the fingerprints, the search history, and the sheer proximity to the murders, it stopped feeling like a joke and started feeling like a rehearsal.
Meanwhile, I kept running over her 911 call in my head. Her voice, her lack of urgency. And then the Instagram messages from the night of the murders.
Search up Brock case. They're my parents. This will blow up.
Most grieving teenagers don't market their tragedy before the coroner even leaves the driveway. The more we dug, the more the inconsistencies piled up. Sarah told us during her first interview that she'd been upstairs doing homework when she heard 2 loud bangs. She claimed she ran down, saw her parents, and immediately called 911. But the phone logs told another story. Between the time of the last gunshot and the 911 call, there was a gap, roughly 3.5 minutes. In that time, she'd sent 2 Snapchats, liked a TikTok, and scrolled through Instagram notifications. 3.5 minutes might not sound like much, but in a homicide investigation, it's an eternity. Long enough to stage a scene. Long enough to compose yourself. Long enough to type a message you know will travel far. We also recovered Ring camera footage from a neighbor's house. It didn't capture the shooting, wrong angle, but it did catch the sound. 2 sharp pops, spaced about 3 seconds apart. No screaming, no yelling, no argument beforehand. Just silence, 2 shots, more silence. That told us this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment fight. Whoever pulled that trigger did it with precision, not impulse. And then came the kicker. We'd sent Sarah's clothing for gunshot residue testing. She swore she hadn't touched the gun that night, swore she'd never even held it. The results came back positive. Particles consistent with having fired a weapon were found on the cuffs of her sweatshirt. When I read that report, it was like watching the case lock into place. The weapon, the prints, the residue, the search history, the video, each one on its own might raise an eyebrow. Together, they were a freight train. Still, we had to be careful. Building a case against a juvenile for killing both parents wasn't something you rushed. We met with the DA's office that night, laid out the evidence. The assistant DA kept shaking her head as she flipped through the photos and reports.
This is going to shock the hell out of this community, she said. Are you ready for that?
I told her the truth. No one's ever ready for something like this. But the facts were the facts, and Sarah Grace Patrick was now more than just a witness. The next morning, I went back to the house for one last sweep. Walking through that living room again, I kept thinking about how ordinary it had all looked at first glance. The mugs, the blanket, the half-played card game, and how just beneath that surface there'd been a storm brewing for weeks, maybe months. I've seen cold-blooded killers before, but rarely do you see one still in high school, still posting TikToks, still playing the part of the grieving daughter while the evidence practically screams their name. This was no longer just about who killed James and Kristen Brock. It was about how a teenager could plan something so calculated, carry it out, and then try to turn it into a moment of online fame. And the more we uncovered, the clearer it became. Sarah wasn't just a suspect. She was the center of the story. We brought Sarah in for a formal interview 4 days after the murders. No cuffs yet, just voluntary cooperation. She walked into the interrogation room wearing jeans, a gray hoodie, and the same casual smirk I'd seen when we first met her at the house. It wasn't the first time I'd seen that smirk. Sometimes people smile when they're nervous. Sometimes they smile when they're lying. The key is figuring out which one you're dealing with. She sat down, pulled the sleeves over her hands, and looked at me like she'd been waiting for this. We started soft. Background questions, school, friends, the night of the incident. Her answers were smooth, controlled, and if you didn't know what was on her phone or in her search history, you might almost believe her. Then I asked about the messages she sent to TikTok creators and bloggers. She shrugged.
I just thought people should know. I mean, it's crazy, right? Something like this doesn't happen every day. I figured they'd talk about it anyway.
No trace of guilt in her voice. No hesitation. She was talking about her parents' murders like it was a breaking news story she happened to witness, not the most traumatic event of her life. I slid a photo across the table, the one of the Glock on the coffee table, slide locked back, magazine half empty.
Ever handled this gun before?
I asked. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me.
Maybe once. Dad showed me how to check if it was loaded, that's it.
I let the silence hang, then pushed over the fingerprint report. Her name, bold and black, circled next to grip and magazine. She looked down, then let out the smallest laugh.
Guess I must have touched it more than I remember.
We moved on to the gunshot residue, the sweatshirt cuffs. She said maybe she brushed against something. The problem with forensics is that particles don't lie, and they don't just appear on your sleeves unless you've been close to a firing weapon. But the most unsettling moment came when we brought up the handwritten letter. We'd obtained it from her father's side of the family, addressed to her biological dad, mailed after the murders. In it, she'd written, "We got this," underlined twice. Her explanation? 10. I saw a fan.
It's hard to explain. I just meant we'll get through it.
But "we got this" didn't sound like grief. It sounded like partnership, alliance, and it was the kind of thing that makes a jury lean forward in their seats. Outside that room, the community was splitting in two. Some neighbors swore Sarah had no history of trouble, good grades, polite in the grocery store, walked dogs for elderly residents. They'd never seen her raise her voice. Others couldn't stop talking about how calm she'd been after the murders. No tears at the vigil, no shaking hands when she signed papers, just this eerie stillness like she'd been expecting it. One woman told me Sarah had come to her porch the day after the murders and asked if reporters had been by yet, before she asked anything about the investigation. Back in the interview, I decided to push harder.
Sarah, you've got fingerprints on the weapon, residue on your sleeves, a search history about inheritance and gun residue, and a private video reenacting a double shooting. You see how that looks, right?
She leaned back, crossed her arms, and said,
Looks like you've made up your mind.
It was a subtle shift, but in that moment, her tone hardened. She wasn't playing the helpful daughter anymore. She was challenging me. We wrapped the interview after 2 hours. She walked out without asking if she was free to go. She already knew she was. For now. When the door closed, I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the air vent. The case wasn't just about evidence anymore. It was about whether a jury could believe a teenager was capable of this level of calculation. And I believed it. We met that night in the conference room. Myself, the lead prosecutor, the forensics team, and 2 detectives who'd been canvassing the neighborhood. One detective reported that a neighbor's security camera had caught Sarah walking calmly out to the mailbox minutes after the shooting, before she called 911. No panic, no signs of shock. She even waved at a passing car. The prosecutor leaned back in her chair, tapped her pen against the table, and said, "We have enough. More than enough." It's a strange feeling, that moment before recommending an arrest. You've spent days pulling threads, and now the whole picture's staring back at you. The evidence wasn't just circumstantial. It was layered, physical, digital, behavioral. The gun in the house, the ballistics match, her prints on the magazine, the GSR on her sleeves, the search history, the TikTok video, the delay in the 911 call, the letter to her father. Any one of those could be explained away. All of them together? You couldn't script it better for the prosecution. I typed up the affidavit myself, not because I didn't trust the others, but because I wanted every word to count. Every timestamp, every quote, every photograph labeled and cross-referenced. When I signed it, I knew the next time I saw Sarah Grace Patrick, she wouldn't be walking out of the building on her own. We kept the arrest quiet. No leaks to the press, no warning to the family. If she knew it was coming, she might run. Or worse, she might try to spin the story first. On the morning we moved in, it was overcast, damp, the kind of gray sky that makes colors look muted. We watched her leave the house with a friend, headed toward a coffee shop downtown. She didn't see the unmarked cars fall in behind her. By the time we pulled her over, she looked more annoyed than scared. "Is this about the interview?" she asked. I told her it was about her parents, and that she was under arrest for their murders. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't smile. This part ends with that shift, the exact moment she realized the case wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a charge, and there was no TikTok caption that could undo it.
I've been in this job long enough to know the moment you knock on someone's door with an arrest warrant in hand, you're about to change their life forever. But this was different. The morning we moved in on Sarah Grace Patrick, the air was heavy. The sky was gray, almost like it knew what was coming. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't running. In fact, she answered the door like she'd been expecting us, phone in hand, hair tied back. That same calm expression she wore the night her parents were killed.
Sarah Grace Patrick, you are under arrest for the murders of James Brock and Kristen Brock, and for 2 counts of aggravated assault.
No tears, no pleas. She just tilted her head slightly, as if she was processing a math problem, and then turned around for us to cuff her. We read her the charges. She barely blinked. Most people, even hardened criminals, react. Anger, denial, fear. Sarah? It was as though she was checking off a box in her mind.
I've had viewers ask me before,
Detective, how can you be so sure this is the person before the trial even starts?
And the answer is always the same. I don't speak in certainties before a jury makes its decision. But I do speak in evidence. In this case, the evidence had been building like a storm cloud. We had the murder weapon, not ditched in a river, not buried in a field, but right there in the Brock family home. Ballistics matched the bullets in James and Kristen's bodies to that gun perfectly. We had fingerprints, Sarah's, on the grip and the magazine. We had her search history. How to erase gun residue from hands, inheritance laws in Georgia, shot placement lethality. And then there was that private TikTok video, filmed weeks before the murders. Sarah acting out a scene eerily similar to what we found in that house. For me, it wasn't just the what, it was the when. These things didn't appear after the fact. They were already there, waiting for someone to connect the dots. As of now, Sarah isn't out walking free. She's in custody awaiting a bond hearing on August 19, 2025. For those of you outside the U.S., a bond hearing is where a judge decides whether someone can be released before trial and under what conditions. With charges like this, 2 counts of murder, the prosecution will almost certainly fight to keep her locked up, and in Georgia, they've got strong footing for that argument. You see, Georgia law doesn't treat capital offenses like petty theft. If the court believes a defendant poses a danger to the community or there's a significant flight risk, they can deny bond entirely. And considering the severity of the charges, the prosecution will have plenty to say. The arrest hit the community like a punch to the gut. Some neighbors told local reporters they couldn't believe Sarah would ever hurt her parents, that she showed no red flags, that she'd been polite, respectful. Others said the calmness she displayed after the murders made them uneasy from day one. And then there's the online storm. On TikTok, Instagram, even Reddit, the case is being picked apart in real time. Some users are sharing clips of Sarah's old videos, dissecting her mannerisms. Others are arguing about whether the internet has already convicted her before the courts have. I've seen this before, the way public opinion fractures into camps, but this case feels different. Maybe it's the social media angle, maybe it's her age, maybe it's because she's a young woman accused of a crime most people associate with hardened middle-aged killers. Now I want to make something very clear. At this stage, Sarah is charged, not convicted. The law says she's innocent until proven guilty. But people have been asking me what could happen if the prosecution wins at trial. Under Georgia law, a murder conviction carries some of the heaviest penalties in the country. For malice murder or felony murder, the sentencing options are life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, life without the possibility of parole, the death penalty in cases with aggravating circumstances. And here's the kicker. Georgia recognizes multiple victims as an aggravating circumstance. Sarah's charges involve 2 murders. That alone could push prosecutors to pursue the death penalty, especially if they can prove premeditation. When I compare this to other cases in Georgia, the precedent is sobering. In 2019, Tiffany Moss was sentenced to death for killing her stepdaughter, in part because of the calculated nature of the act and the cruelty involved. In another case, a man named Robert Olson got life without parole for a double homicide with far less media attention than this. If a jury believes Sarah's actions were deliberate, calculated, and without remorse, and if the state pushes for it, the maximum penalty is very much on the table. I keep thinking about the moment we took her in, how quiet she was, how, in a case involving 2 sudden, brutal deaths, the suspect stood there like we'd interrupted her morning coffee. That's the part that sticks with me. Maybe it's because in all my years of service I've seen panic, fear, even misplaced bravado. But this was something else. A calm that didn't match the storm swirling around her. The trial will tell us more. Evidence will be argued, witnesses will testify, and a jury will decide her fate. But no matter what happens in court, the image of that quiet, almost clinical calm will stay with me. This case isn't over. Far from it. The bond hearing on August 19th will be the first big moment in the courtroom, and from there the timeline to trial could move quickly, or drag on for years. If you want to follow every twist in the Sarah Grace Patrick case, from legal maneuvers to verdict, you're going to want to stick with us. We dig into the details, we pull from court records, and we'll keep you updated every step of the way. So hit subscribe, click the bell icon, and share this video. The more people who see the facts, the more we can cut through the noise and get to the truth.